it oftentimes can be lost on who's actually paying for that schooling, but who's paying for it are Tennesseans, parents of students in our K-12 public school systems. And we need to make sure that we are continuously looking at our process, the best practices, improvements that we can make to be certain that this incredibly important funding is being done in a way that benefits our students, that provides a return on our investment, and that is the best stewardship possible for the dollars that we spend in our K-12 system. We're at a very important time in our state. We've had significant challenges and changes in our education system, but we think that this is the right opportunity. We have funding in place in our education system. We're spending significant dollars, both from a federal standpoint and in our state's budget, and we need to make sure that we're spending those dollars correctly. I want to say that Commissioner Schwinn will come up and provide more details about this process, but what's most important in the next weeks and months ahead is that we listen. It's that we get input. Is that we have feedback. It's that we all recognize that a funding formula that has been in place for 30 years likely has a lot of opportunity for improvement. Our schools are significantly different than they were 30 years ago. Our approach to learning is different than it was 30 years ago. There have been best practices across the country that have been implemented that we can learn from as we modernize and update our funding approach to the future of Tennessee. Students in our K-12 system are our future, and education funding is the single most significant in size funding component of our budget. We need to make certain that we're continuously improving and continuously assessing how it is that we spend these dollars. Listening will be key. We'll have a period of input, public comment, stakeholder input. This will be a way to collaboratively determine what is the best path forward. It will be focused on more of a student-based funding strategy than a system-based funding strategy, understanding the individual needs of students so that parents can see how dollars are invested for their students' individual needs. It should be transparent. It should be accountable. It should be a record of a return on investment. We ought to be able to see what we're investing in kids and what the outcomes are for those investments, so it will be outcomes based as well. But most importantly, it will be collaborative, and it'll be created by the input that we receive over the next couple months. So, Commissioner, if you would come forward and give a little more detail to what the plans are.
Good morning. I actually want to start by thanking you, sir, for taking on something so bold. I think when we talk about public education and we talk about the needs of our students across the state, every policy decision, every time we make a programmatic decision, it is rooted in our funding system. It is rooted in what resources we have and how we strategically allocate those to benefit the students in our state. I'm excited about what this means for education. I think it is time for us to come together, all Tennesseans, to have a voice and a seat at the table, to be able to really talk about what our shared and collective vision is for public education in the state, what it means for everybody to have a voice and a place, what it means to strategically invest in our students so that they are able to thrive with whatever futures they decide for themselves. We know that now is the time to bring those people together, and I want to talk a little bit about what that is going to mean and what is ahead in the next couple of months. And so Part of developing a strategic investment strategy for public education in the state is really going to mean that we include representatives and representation from every single part of the state. That's East, Middle, and West Tennessee. That's urban and rural and suburban. That's thinking about our parents, our teachers, our student voice. It's thinking about our business community, our chambers of commerce, people who are zeroed and focused in on things like fiscal responsibility, on outcomes and post-secondary readiness. Because ultimately, when we think about community engagement and what a funding formula or strategic investment strategy means, it is about ensuring that we are preparing our students for success after they leave the pre-K-12 system. That is our shared goal. It is making sure that our graduates can go into the workforce, and whether that's through whatever post-secondary pathway they choose for themselves, they can thrive and be successful and support their families and continue to build Tennessee. That is what a strong strategic investment strategy does for our state and for our students. Over the next several months, what you can expect from the department is to create a series of committees and subcommittees focused on specific issues and concerns that are part of a strategic investment strategy for education. That again is going to include representation from all parts of the state and from all district types and sizes. That will include community members, and we have a website up right now. It's tn.gov/education/TNEDU funding. So any Tennessean is able to go and sign up to get regular updates. They're able to sign up if they are interested in serving on a committee, and certainly to continue to have additional time and support and energy focused in their local communities to collect that feedback and provide that directly to the department. Every voice matters, and I want to reiterate that. Every voice matters. Whether you are a parent in Northeast Tennessee, you are a community member in Lake County, you are a business owner in Shelby County, and everywhere in between. Your voice matters because public education in the state is what builds Tennessee in the future. We are encouraging and inviting you to be part of this conversation and this dialogue so that what we produce together can create a strategic investment strategy that moves Tennessee forward. We've had some incredible announcements over the last month. We think about Blue Oval City. We have districts who are investing strategically with their ESSER dollars. We have Tennessee All-Core with tutoring and Reading 360 and amazing things that are going on in this state related to education, building on over 12 years of acceleration and national attention on Tennessee, because Tennesseans know how to do this well. So bringing everyone together to continue that legacy is really important, and this is a moment in time for us to really show what it means to reset and create a bold vision for what it can be and what we want students to be able to achieve in the future. I'm thrilled that we're taking advantage of this opportunity in this moment in time where lots of changes are happening in education. We need to continue to move our state forward. I believe deeply that this is one of the most important things that we will do in education policy for years to come. It is innovative, it is important, it is bold, and it is time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner, why don't you stay up here? Thank you. I think it's not just the most important thing we've done in education policy. If we do this well and we do it right, it'll be one of the most important things we do to shape the future of our state. We do all agree that the next generation of Tennesseans that are in our K-12 schools right now are those that will be leading our state in a few short years. And our appropriate investment in their education is a exciting, appropriate investment in Tennessee. So this is important. It's a significant, it will take a tremendous amount of work, and yet this is just the kickoff. This is part of a process of assimilating that feedback and of listening and putting together a strategy going forward. So we're grateful for your being here to be a part of it. We're happy to answer questions. I think the hope would be that if we get the feedback that we believe we're going to get and we can develop a plan, it will include lawmakers. So the General Assembly will be included in the process, members of the General Assembly. We hope to have it ready for the session. The timing is uncertain because of the process itself, but we hope so.
We also know that no matter how bad or good the formula is, if there's not enough investment, we're still, gonna have a problem. Do you anticipate calling for further investment in public education?
We've increased our spending on public education every year that I've been here, and I suspect that we will do so again. We're putting together our budget right now. Funding is incredibly important, not only the formula and the strategy for it, but the dollar amount. So we're creating that budget right now. Ford intends what?
Ford intends to set up a video shop at the do you think that would clash?
So we are a right to work state, and Ford has been clear about the fact that the workers at that plant will determine what the environment, what the work rules are for that plant. So that will be determined by the workers at the Ford plant, and Ford's been clear about that.
Do you think
I think what it does is it allows workers to have the right to choose the environment that they work in, and that's what will happen in that plant as well. Andy?
I mean, if you're expecting session starts, regular session starts in January. I mean, this ending. And you've already done a lot of work and been baked so much and everything else just.
I think it'll be, yeah, it'll be clear soon what is, as we roll this out, what suggestions we have, but this is a process that we, as I said just a minute ago, we haven't committed to a timeline. We are only committing to a process that will incorporate feedback from stakeholders to make sure that we're being good stewards of the education dollars that we have. Certainly, we want to propose ideas, and we've done a lot of work to look at best practices across the country, to look at what's happening in other states, to look at ways that we think are innovative and creative and provide student-focused, outcomes-based approach, but we don't have a commitment to a timeline, only to a process.
The last time, this. Are you committed?
We have no plans to increase taxes.
I know you were talking about certain laws. Can you talk more about that?
So we passed a law last year that strengthened penalties for those who use guns in crime. And we're looking at ways that we can work with the legislature to attack gun violence and violent crime in general. It's a challenge. It's a problem in our country. It's a problem all across the country. It's very concerning. And so we're looking at ways and talking to stakeholders about what it is that we can do and what is our strategy for fighting crime.
Reviewing the formula.
Well, I think that, and I actually will let you address this more definitively, but for example, as our education system has been changed over the past few years, as we focused on a wider array of pathways for students, CTE, for example, vocational, technical, agricultural education combined with other. We should look at the way funding is attached to students who pursue those pathways. How we look at that, how we weight that, how it changes funding for a particular student is what we'll need to determine over the next few months. But it's that kind of change in our educational approach that requires, in our view, a good look at how we fund a student that pursues a certain pathway. That's one example. You want to dig into that a little bit?
Sure. So when we look at education funding across all 50 states, and we've done some reviews on that and spoken with national experts, we know that there are ways to invest that are big block grants. But ultimately, what you are going to hear throughout this process is the word students. A parent sitting in any school, in any district in the state, should be able to answer fundamental questions about how the state is investing in his or her child. We should be able to say, how much money does my child receive to get a good education in this state? Is it transparent? Is it flexible to meet the needs of students as we move along? And we know that education has changed a lot over the last 3 decades. We need to have a strategic investment strategy that follows what that child is doing and is able to be responsive to the immediate needs. We need to ensure that we have a strategic investment strategy that is connected to whatever pathway a child wants to move down, and that frankly, we can publicly track where those dollars are going. Those are all things that are value systems that I think we hear across the state of Tennessee. And that really comes down to the student, the parent, and the school. How do those 3 systems work together, those 3 entities work together to provide the highest quality education? And how are we able to report back very clearly, transparently, and candidly about how we are investing in every single individual student in their future? There are essentially 3 big funding types. There's when you look at kind of categorical, and that's what you might expect from the federal government. So your Title I program, for example, you get a big block grant that is targeted to a very specific need. You can only spend within that box. Most states have moved away from that. And so it's just the federal government essentially that lives in that space. States oftentimes are in what we call a resource-based funding model, and that's when you think about things like ratios. So if you have 500 students, you get a principal. If you have 400 students, you don't. Again, those are funding larger systems, but that's when you're going to see some challenges in terms of the variety like we have here in Tennessee and like we see across the country. What we're talking about is moving to figuring out what it takes to educate an individual child based on that child's specific needs. So you might have three students in the same family. They might have different needs based on those specific characteristics. We want to figure out what that looks like. And that's why it's going to take so many people with all sorts of lenses and places that they live and perspectives and experiences to come together to really paint that picture so we can have a student-centered and a student-driven funding system. That is going to be something that I think is going to be really important. It is going to be challenging to bring all these voices together and create a strategic investment strategy that works for everybody. And that's why we're inviting so much public comment and participation to ensure that it is a Tennessee system and reflects the values that we hold and share together.
I know you've expressed concern with the president's vaccine mandate, but some GOP members are calling for legislation to not allow companies to require vaccines. On board for that?
Well, I haven't seen that proposal. I know there's a lot of conversations about what needs to be done, but I've not been involved in the legislature's conversations around where they're headed with a proposed special session, so I can't really comment on that.
Where do you stand on employees who choose to get fired?
What I think about vaccine is that it ought to be a choice for people. I think it's a bad idea to mandate vaccines. I think mandates are not the right strategy. They can be counterproductive. I think that vaccines are the most important tool that we have in this state to fight pandemic. We had 130,000 people choose to get vaccinated in the last 7 days. That's very good. I encourage Tennesseans to pursue a vaccine. I encourage Tennesseans to get vaccinated. It is the single most important and effective tool that we have to battle the pandemic, but I do not think that we should mandate vaccines.
Do you think a COVID-19 special session would be a necessary expense on taxpayers?
I don't know what they're going to do in that session. I can only speculate, and that really wouldn't be appropriate.
Governor, do you believe that children with disabilities schools?
I think that one of the things that this funding formula will show is that we ought to consider children with disabilities uniquely, in the same way that we would consider children that have English as a second language uniquely, or children who live in a rural district in a vocational educational session. So I actually believe that every child should have an individual focus and should have an opportunity in our education system to an effective education.
I was under the COVID-19 umbrella, I was asking that question. Do you believe that children deserve to go to school safely under the COVID, including masks, as first you have to vote against your legislation?
Yeah, I think that every child, and most importantly, what I think is that every parent should have the opportunity and to make decisions about their child's health and well-being, including parents of children with disabilities, every child.
Does the government have a role in securing Tennessee schools?
The government's role is to operate public schools in a way that provides opportunity for every student, including those with disabilities.
And lastly, Governor, what are your theories that me as a member of the press to you? Am I correct to you as a member of the press this journalism?
Sir, that'll be something you'll have to take up. That'll be up to something that you'll need to take up with Department of Safety. You know, since I came into office, I've believed that education is one of the most important things that we should be engaged in as a government. And we started from day one on initiatives to improve our education system, just as Governor Haslam had done before and Governor Bredesen before that. We will continue to look to new strategies, to new approaches, to innovative ways to improve our public school education in this state. It is incredibly important to the future of Tennessee. I believe that any system that is 30 years old, any component of a system that is 30 years old, very likely may well be outdated in its approach. And from the time I came in here, we said, you know, the BEP is something that's complicated. Very few understand it. Many don't like it. We ought to really think through if it's the very best way forward. And that's what's driven this decision.
Question right here.
Not except that they're proposing one, but I'm not engaged in the particulars about what they might be bringing forth.
Concerned about comments.
I haven't heard those comments and I haven't been engaged in discussions around that second session. So our focus has been on the first session. We know that Ford's announcement and that investment in our state's transformational. It's good for all Tennesseans. It will be incredibly important, particularly to the families. It'll be transformational to the families with generational impact to the people of especially West Tennessee. We know that. I think our lawmakers across this state in large part understand that this is a big win for the people of Tennessee. So I expect that we'll have success in that session. Thank you all very much.